This is a review of The Conditions of Learning and Theory of Instruction by Robert M. Gagne. Gagne defines learning as a set of processes which are internal to the learner and triggered by external stimuli. He refers to these as learning events, and his thesis for this book is not all learning is the same. He starts by identifying 5 different types of learned capabilities and establishing that each of these learned capabilities come with their own unique set of internal conditions within the learner and external conditions within the environment that are necessary to the learning process. By using research about how we learn and identifying those conditions around the learner, Gagne was able to develop a systematic method for learning. This method is known as the 9 events of instruction and is still heavily relied on today. But I want to take a step back and look at the learning science behind the 9 events of instruction, because there are a lot of nuances that get lost in translation without the context of the larger theoretical principles of learning around it. So to start with the 5 different learned capabilities, we have intellectual skills, which are rules, concepts, and discriminations, differentiating one thing from another. We also have verbal information, which are memorized facts, bodies of knowledge, motor skills, which refer to physical capabilities, although he does identify the mental processes that are involved with that. Cognitive strategies, this is what we've referred to in this class as metacognitive abilities. And attitudes, which fall into the emotional behavioral sphere of influence. The concept of designing instruction for different domains of learning centers the learner. In addition to categorizing different learned capabilities, he also identified the workflow of information through the brain, calling it the information processing model. Up top, you have the metacognitive aspects of learning. Expectancies are important for motivation, and this ties in with Knoll's assumptions of learning, which is that it is important for learners to contextualize the information that they are to receive. When they know what to expect, they can apply their selective perception, and this motivates them when they know the end goal. Gagne also emphasizes the importance of prompts and questions to stimulate the learner's executive control processes. This is essentially the exercise of reflection, which we know is an important aspect of learning because it allows the learner to create meaning from the information they have received, and this helps with encoding it into our memory. So these executive control processes are tied to our cognitive abilities. Then you have the external stimulus from the environment all the way on the left. And the first thing that is required is attention is a necessary prerequisite for learning. The environment provides the outside stimulus that brings in the learner's attention. Then there is the encoding process where information moves from short to long-term memory. Finally, you have the performance of the skill, which leads to feedback, reinforcing knowledge through feedback.
While this book is rooted in cognitive theory, Gagne refers to behavioral theories as foundational to our understanding of learning. Specifically, he refers to Skinner's operant conditioning, which establishes reinforcement as a method of achieving desired results. Gagne emphasizes the role of reinforcement as a form of feedback, which is essential for learning and encourages correct performance of a learned task. He also identifies different types of motivation, which are essential to understand in order to design effective instructional materials. Incentive motivation refers to purely extrinsic motivation, but this can be leveraged to jumpstart learners until they develop the more intrinsic task and achievement-based motivations. This figure is an example of what Gagne called a learning hierarchy. In a learning hierarchy, you have a complex task or skill being broken down into its component parts. This is useful for understanding the order in which information should be learned. Learning hierarchies rely on the idea of cumulative learning. That is, we build our learning off of prior knowledge. He recommends using verbal cues and guidance to remind learners of prerequisite knowledge that applies to the higher order skill they are trying to perform. Learning hierarchies complement the method of scaffolded and segmented learning because by breaking down advanced concepts, skills, and tasks into manageable pieces, the learner can accomplish their goals. It's no surprise that Gagne dedicates an entire chapter to problem solving, emphasizing its critical role in learning. He highlights how important it is to be able to apply skills across a variety of situations rather than simply memorizing responses for specific scenarios. What Gagne refers to as discovery learning aligns closely with Kolb's experiential learning cycle. Discovery learning encourages learners to grasp more complex concepts or rules by applying their understanding of simpler ones, gaining feedback from their process. Unlike rule learning, which is typically supported by guidance, problem solving relies heavily on previously acquired knowledge and the learner's ability to independently synthesize and innovate. Problem solving exercises metacognitive abilities as well, enabling learners to think about their own thinking processes. He compares the cognitive abilities of novices to experts, explaining that experts have more advanced problem-solving skills, which stems from their deeper knowledge and experience. Gagne talks about the various ways that learners acquire cognitive strategies. And while there is still very much a lot of mystery around it, he posits that they are discovered through experience by learners, and they can also be displayed by experts. He references a 1975 study by Wellman, Ritter, and Flavel, which show how children make use of their own cognitive strategy when prompted to do so. As we age, our cognitive abilities become more advanced, and the metacognitive skills of experts are more efficient than in novices, partially because they are able to physically represent a problem, which helps them to solve it in less steps than a novice would take. Gagne suggests that instructional designers begin with an analysis that takes into account the objective of learning, the prerequisite requirements of the learner, and the effectiveness and limitations of various types of media. He outlines a systematic method for deciding the best medium to deliver instruction that's based on the type of learned capability. Gagne acknowledges that there are limitations on interactivity when designing instruction through media. However, considering that we have much more advanced tools at our disposal today, we can take this into account when considering how to best deliver instructional material. It doesn't need to be complicated, though. For example, something as simple as a picture in a textbook can aid in the learning of verbal information. What's important is that the learning process is facilitated by the conditions of learning outlined throughout the book. This brings me to the 9 events of instruction, which is the culmination of Gagne's instructional learning theory. On the left, you have the internal learning processes, and on the right, you have the external events that help stimulate these processes, starting with gaining attention. It's important, though, to consider that these should be tailored to the specific type of learning outcome and learned capability as outlined in the book in order to be fully effective. By centering the learner in this way, he is acknowledging a more accessible way of learning. This echoes the material that we learned this semester around neurodiversity. While Gagne does not address accessibility specifically in this book, the concept of customized learning does support it, and I kind of consider this a precursor to it. Today, if we consider neurodiversity to be another condition of learning, we can incorporate this when designing instruction according to these 9 events. I could easily talk about this book for an hour because Gagne is extremely thorough in going through the specific conditions that are unique to each of the 5 learned capabilities. However, I hope this video serves as an overview of the key takeaways from Conditions of Learning and how it applies to today, as it's still an extremely relevant book and I really enjoyed reading it.